We all love a good success story, right? But what about the hidden costs? That's what we're diving into. This is a story about how the very systems designed to push us forward can create consequences that nobody really wants to see.
You know, when you're looking from a distance, say at a booming city skyline or a thriving global market, it all tends to look pretty good. We see the big picture, that grand narrative of success.
You've got rising markets, incredible innovations, and you see leaders celebrating their big wins under these bright lights. On the surface, it really does look like a system that's working perfectly.
So in this explainer, we're going to peel back those layers inspired by the architecture of Imbalance to see what's actually happening just beneath that polished surface of success.
Okay, first, let's meet the two men at the very center of this story. They're both celebrated for driving the future, but, and this is key, in very, very different ways.
So on one hand, you have Adrian Voss. He's the quiet architect of policy, working from the inside, shaping whole economies with frameworks that are all about order and stability. And on the other hand, you've got Cale Draven, the public-facing innovator who just blows up entire industries from the outside.
The public story is pretty clear. Even with their different methods, quiet influence versus loud disruption, these two are seen as the twin engines of global progress.
And you know what? At first glance, the data seems to back this story up completely. The numbers, well, they tell a really compelling story of success. I mean, just take a look at this. The message is crystal clear. Under their combined influence, key metrics like investment flows and economic growth, they're not just stable, they are consistently on the rise. And we're not talking about abstract numbers here. Voss's policies and Draven's ventures create these measurable, positive outcomes that leaders can point to as definitive proof that, hey, this is working. And in this game, efficiency is everything. So, the crucial point here is that if you go by the official story and you look at all the data available, everything seems to be working perfectly. The system is functioning exactly as it was designed. Or is it?
And this is where the story really takes a turn. Because while numbers are great at capturing results, they don't capture distribution. They reflect growth, sure, but not always consequence. It's time to ask, what aren't we measuring?
So let's flip the coin. Let's look at the other side of this story and see how this brilliant, efficient system creates hidden costs, the kind that just don't show up in those glossy economic reports.
The reality on the ground, well, it's one of gradual displacement. It's not some sudden collapse, but more like a slow, quiet erosion. Local businesses start closing their doors, and whole communities find themselves dependent on systems they have absolutely no control over.
From the architect's point of view, from Adrian Voss's perspective, these local failures aren't bugs in the system. They're features. They're just acceptable trade-offs for achieving that bigger goal of stability and order on a macro level. But eventually, these abstract consequences, they stop being so abstract. They start to become concrete, visible events that are a whole lot harder for anyone to ignore.
And this slide just illustrates the pattern perfectly. So, a policy designed by Voss for efficiency, at first, it's hailed as a huge success, praised for bringing in investment. But then, within months, the side effects kick in. Local supply chains get bypassed, wealth starts flowing outward, and the regional economy fractures. And that's when you start to see protests that question the very logic of the whole system.
At the very same time, Cale Draven's relentless expansion escalates into this direct conflict. When his operations clash with national laws, the authorities try to regulate him, but he doesn't negotiate, he just expands further, using his economic power to just steamroll their rules, testing the very limits of what a government can even do.
So when you look at these two stories together, Voss's policy failure and Draven's regulatory fight, they stop being just isolated incidents. They start forming a really clear and honestly a disturbing pattern. See, one works from the inside, the other works from the outside, but both lead to the same result, systems that are incredibly powerful but are becoming less and less accountable, straining the very balance of society. For the public, this isn't some sudden shock. It's more of a gradual, creeping awareness that something is just fundamentally wrong, this feeling that the rules don't apply to everyone evenly and that their own ability to influence things is shrinking. That success that we celebrated at the very beginning of this explainer, it's now showing its hidden architecture. The growth is real, yeah, but it's built on a foundation of deep structural imbalance. And that progress, that relentless innovation that felt so certain and exciting, now it's creating a kind of pressure that's threatening to shatter the very structures it was supposed to improve in the first place.
So all this leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. Look, the system is clearly working. It's efficient, it's growing, it's powerful. But maybe the most important question isn't whether the system works. Maybe the real question is, who does it truly work for? And what are we all willing to sacrifice in the name of progress?